right, start over. I won't go into it. Just start over. Fucking. Okay. Anyway, here we are. So me and Jeremy just took a. So we just had a bad take. We had like a 5-minute take where I thought we were streaming, but I have to hit about 400 about 400 different buttons before it actually officially starts streaming. And I had only hit 399 buttons to get our stream going. But the news is, as our title says, that Jeremy came out to Oregon and we tried, well, 2C-B for the first time and mescaline for the first time. And we were just talking about the kinds of precautions that we do when we're trying something new. You know, there aren't a lot of safe medicines out there that you can experiment with. So the opportunity to do something new does not come up every day. So step one, right, is, well, our source, which we have worked with before and know is good. They always say, you know, don't just get something off the street or something. But sometimes you kind of don't have a choice. I mean, it's illegal, and so controlling your source is not easy. Unfortunately, the laws that we have aren't for harm reduction. They are, quite frankly, for harm maximization. The drug war, right? It's basically a harm maximization machine. They make finding good sources difficult. They make getting good information difficult. You're encouraged to keep everything secret. So if you do have a problem, you can't talk about it. You know, the way the drug war works is really harm maximization. So harm reduction is the opposite. It's where we compensate for those problems and try to make it so that we can explore our own minds as safely as possible.
Yeah, and we're calling this. Oh, right. Yeah, you already said. So yeah, earlier you were telling us what kind of initial procedures you go through to, like, how do you know what precautions to take? I don't think I got cut off.
Well, first of all, you've got to know your dosing, right? I mean, the obvious thing. So you got to know the dosing, and you have to know how long it's going to last. What's it called? Drug interactions. Now, I'm not on any meds, and Jeremy's not on any either, other than supplements. So I tend to forget about interactions, but when I'm working with other people, I have to remember, because goddamn, a lot of people are on meds these days.
Yeah. So just to reiterate, those three things you said were like massive topics. How much to take, right? Like there's always a dose that's threshold or very light. There's a solid dose, and then there's an overdose, which in most all psychedelics, there's really no fatal upper limit. You just get really uncomfortable. But always important to know how much to take and then how long it lasts, which also means that means you have to plan your day and consider, what you're going to do and where you're going to do it and, how long it lasts, right? So you don't want to be going to work in the middle. And then, whatever the last thing was, I forgot. Right, so harm reduction. Oh, you mentioned read trip reports. That's important. See what people think. Well, you said drug interactions. Anyway, trip reports. See what it feels like. Psychedelics feel psychedelic, but they all have slightly different qualities. So that's good to know. Mushrooms are introverting, kinda, LSD has more energy, and as we found, mescaline comes on very, very slowly. Like it takes, say, 3 hours to come on with full effect. And it lasts, we were still feeling it like 14 hours later. But because it's so gradual, you kind of work with it differently. There's less of a peak in the way, one would think of a peak. It's coming on fast. So anyway, there's different components. And then Chris mentioned drug interactions. If you're on meds, yeah. So anyway, good. Yeah, you can keep going, man. I just wanted to fill those in a little bit.
Nope, that's great. So yeah, what we learned basically, and then the best website. Well, I mean, I look at things like Wikipedia a lot. I also look at Reddit a lot when I'm trying to learn about a medicine. Because what I like about Reddit is that the information might be contradictory. It's not the best place for solid information, but it does give you an idea of what's going on sort of culturally around the substance. Like, what is the conversation going on? And that can be really, really useful too, I think. In things like trip reports, I sort of don't, in one way, I don't think it's that important because one person's experience is a lot different than another person's, but it still kind of gives you a general idea of kind of the culture around the substance, and then by learning the culture around the substance, you can kind of intuit what it might feel like, and that helps you prepare.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, culture meaning the things people are writing, or literally the kinds of people?
Oh, I guess both. I meant, but on Reddit, it's hard to know the kinds of people.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
I meant more like what people are writing.
Yeah, I agree. I've read a lot of trip reports. It can get fairly subjective. I mean, like, visions of whatnot, and so forth. Yeah, people will notice details about substances. Sorry, I'm trying to lock my doors here. Yeah, anyway, people will talk about details of these things. So every psychedelic really is a map. There are a couple of sessions ago we talked about various ways to relate the various substances on a map, and we were proposing different ideas, but short story is each one, you figure humans are complex creatures, so there's lots of different aspects to us, and different psychedelics affect all those aspects in different ways. So yeah, that's what I noticed on these two new ones is, psychedelics feel psychedelic. And I hadn't really considered this. What I hadn't considered before is the ways that they're different. And one thing that I'll say on the chemistry side, which is sometimes fun to check out, mushrooms, DMT, are tryptamines. LSD is, they classify it in one of two ways, but to me, tryptamines feel kind of like MDMA, very washy and rolly, and like whenever I smoke DMT, I feel wet. Ayahuasca, it's from the jungle. It's kind of more metaphorical, but and then these two new ones were tryptamines. Phenethylamines, which have, what did I say? The tryptamines have 2 carbon rings. And they have this similar characteristic. And 2 carbon rings is also the basis of serotonin. And then the phenethylamines have 1 carbon ring, and they're the basis of dopamine. And to me, and I haven't tried unless you categorize acid that way, but I kind of wouldn't. I haven't tried this class of drug. MDMA is phenethylamine, except it's not primarily psychoactive, just in the way it works in the brain. It doesn't follow the patterns that others do. It causes serotonin to release. But to me, it felt these phenethylamines, 2C-B and mescalines, felt really different. They felt similar, but they worked differently. Instead of having this kind of like washy, rolly feeling, it felt like things weren't moving around as much. Also, the visuals were less. It could be a dose thing, but I feel like at the same dosage with mushrooms, I'd have tons of visuals. And it's drier. That's the only word I can think of.
I thought that mescaline and 2C-B were actually quite a bit different than one another. Why don't we talk about this?
Oh, you did?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah. But the mescaline, so we did it by a late. One thing is when we're preparing is we have made this our new thing. We did it both times this time, and we've done it in the past, is you go find specifically where is going to be home base for your for your experience.
Yeah, good call.
You mind if I take a call?
Oh, go for it.
All right. Have fun.
Right. So I guess we're still kind of telling you guys what we did on our trip, which follows the harm reduction protocols. So these are all things that we do before a trip. And at the end of the day, you do these things because they're interesting. There's just interesting crossover. Knowing your shit or doing your homework is, you could also call harm reduction that, but at the same time, it's really interesting to learn what a drug is, how it works, why does it last so long or short, right? How is the body relating to this chemical? What's it doing in the brain? Is it changing various levels in the body of neurotransmitters, amino acids? Does it change heart rate? I mean, I can only nerd out on that stuff so much, but then there's subjective things of, some are more inward, some are more outward, hence the trip reports. But the more attention you give to these things in more different ways, you start creating a relationship, and it gets more and more creative, and you can use these compounds in very specific, kind of dialed in ways. So anyway, we do this because, I want to make sure I know what I'm doing. Also, almost the opposite problem of doing too much. I want to know dosage so I can push the dosage. I don't want to indiscriminately take a lot, but at the same time, I don't want to be timid. So if I know Psychonaut Wiki, that's their Arrowhead's amazing. It's very DIY user, user-led. But PsychoWiki is ultimately more rigorous and kind of like everything is kind of in summation. It's like a Wikipedia page, right? There's not a lot of trip reports, but it does give you a lot of information, and it gives you dosing guides, tells you how to use it, different drugs, used in different ways. So we're doing all these things, considering drug interactions, considering dosing, considering how long it lasts, Chris said, and then there's the day of doing it. And he and I will usually, if we don't already have somewhere picked out, but if it's a new place, we'll walk around town, or usually I'll look for a park or somewhere in nature, which gives you the option to have some privacy and kind of chill. And then if you want to go into town, you can, but you're not stuck around people. So it's just about options. So usually we'll be in a park, but then we'll walk and go grab a beer later. Then any other considerations of weather. You're just trying to set up a day where you can solely focus on your drug experience. if you want to add something in, like going to Meow Wolf or a museum or whatever, like that's fine. But you want it all to be intentional. You don't want any surprises. It's just not fun. Psychedelics are strong, and they create strong experiences. And short of doing some kind of ritual ceremony, or, well, I mean, I'm not saying you can't do acid or mushrooms like basically anywhere, but as long as it's intentional, that's it. You don't want any weird phone calls in the middle. So yeah, set up our day, come out with a backpack. Fanny packs are really nice. You can fit a bunch of little things in there and not have to track anything, but we usually bring a blanket, throw it out, backpack with like water, a little food. You're probably not hungry for most of the day. And then just, enjoy. It's good to have the evening free, especially if you can't predict exactly how you'll feel afterward or how long it'll last. And then, you do your day. So that's what we did twice in Oregon. The first time, oh, you coming back?
I tell you, doing this takes a certain level of mastery.
Oh yeah.
Or I don't know if the word is mastery, but I'm working on the mastery part.
I kind of went from harm reduction, different things, saying this is stuff you and I do, and this is kind of how we set up our trips using that model. And I kind of just ended at, we make sure that the whole day is set up intentionally so there's no weird interruptions. We tend to find a place in nature just to have that option, but you can go into the city if you want, and just to bring a little food and water and throw out a blanket and just kind of devote the day to the experience.
Let's talk. What was your impression of mescaline?
Well, actually, I'd love to hear how you think they're so different. I think they're different with timing, but did you think the actual, like at the peak of the experience, they felt really different?
Yes, radically.
Oh, okay, I'd like to hear about that.
Okay, I'll talk about that. 2C-B, other than it didn't have, it almost felt interchangeable with LSD to me. Other than the fact that it takes about half as long, which is like fucking rad. Imagine like acid. You can take a full dose of acid and it only takes 6 hours to trip. That's like the perfect drug for you.
Yes, totally. And 2C-B
but it was like
pretty
in my face, kind of pretty dramatic. I mean, we only took a moderate dose, so it wasn't like super dramatic. But it just had that qualitatively, like, I don't know how to put it, in my face kind of.
Yeah, I would say
like
it
acid
almost
does.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's almost like your field of vision or your spatial awareness gets really kind of working.
And I did hallucinate a little bit, like patterns, usual psychedelic patterns. One thing I was thinking about, having done both, to tell you the truth, is it's fun to talk about the differences, but man, psychedelics have a lot in common, frankly.
Yeah.
Like, they feel different, but other than salvia, which is a lot different than the rest,
yes,
they are kind of, and ketamine. Ketamine is a lot different too. But the serotogenic ones, the ones that are mostly hitting your serotonin receptors, are kind of a lot alike ultimately.
Well, that's what I was saying. The way they feel, at least to me, in the body is similar, but there's all these subtle characteristics that function differently, like the ones you're noting. Something else I noticed about both of these, it was different for me than mushrooms and acid, was that on mushrooms and acid, when I stop moving, I really don't want to start again. And if I am moving, I feel really in the flow and kind of don't want to stop. But I didn't have that sensation with these two new ones. All right, so
yeah, part of that was dosage. We only took moderate dosage, but I'll talk about mescaline. Mescaline is a little bit unique in that even while we were the ride up takes like forever, like 3 hours. It's like a hill. The shape of mescaline is different than any other drug I've ever taken because you're still coming up definitely like, let's say, 2.5 hours after you take it.
Yeah.
And then you just kind of have this, I'm trying to get on camera, this hill like this. There is no peak at all. It's not a snow-capped mountain. It's
super
a rolling
gentle,
hill. And it lasts forever. You just slowly come up over about 3 hours. You're peaking for 3 hours, and then you're coming down for another 5.
Yeah.
And the other thing, well, I didn't hallucinate hardly at all, only a little bit. Closed eye patterns, mostly. Or when I looked in the sky, I noticed at the edges, like if I saw, leaves in front of the sky, I would see that it would sort of make some patterns based on the leaves, but very subtle. Not many hallucinations on mescaline.
Yeah, agreed.
And then the really interesting part is we were taught, and when we take these moderate doses anyway, we talk most of the time. And what I noticed is, and sometimes even on moderate doses of, say, mushrooms, when I'm peaking, I'm not very talkative. It's hard to follow. I won't always be listening, or I won't always be able to express myself very well if I'm on mushrooms. But on mescaline, I felt very clear-headed. It almost felt as though the feeling was almost like on top of being sober. It was like extra. Rather than taking away from who I am when I'm sober, it was almost like extra sparkles. Because I was very clear-headed.
Yeah, I found that really fascinating, and honestly, for me, that's ideal. I would choose mescaline over LSD any day now, for a number of reasons, but that's a big one.
Jeremy was hilarious because he was really we won't get into sourcing, but he was into getting both of these. He really wanted to try them. And as soon as it kicked in, both times, he was like, I found my drug. This is it. Finally, I found it. And he did the same thing on both of them. As soon as we were feeling, he was like, oh my God, I love this stuff so much. I finally found it.
Yeah, either I was making it up, or after a lifetime of psychedelic use, I had a really good intuition about things and was right. So I'm kind of running with the latter. I wanted to like them, and man, that clear-headedness, that makes what it was different about both of those.
I didn't quite hear you.
What else would you notice? What do you notice during the actual peak of both of them that you would say is really different?
Well, the main thing really is that with mescaline is the weird time frame, and I could see how at higher doses it'd be an incredible visionary adventure, because it's just slowly coming on and slowly taking over your reality, and it goes so slow that you never hit the wall. You're never like, oh my God, what's going on? Because it's just slowly it's like you're being slowly lifted into heaven, kind of. It's not violent. It doesn't jack you up into it's like the opposite of DMT or salvia, which are very violent because they go so fast. And mushrooms are kind of like that too, because I find the distance, you take mushrooms and then you start to feel it about a half hour later, and then you're peaking 15 minutes after that. So it's like a pretty fast transition.
Which really contributes to the whole character of your trip. I mean, that's like a really big. I kept noticing that when the peak happens so quickly, it doesn't allow the brain enough time to adjust, and it gives you the sense of being taken over, and then you really have to learn how to surrender. But when it's so gradual, then you kind of adjust along the way, which I think is what Chris is referring to when it's as if, because you've adjusted to it and you've adjusted to your own changing states, you kind of feel like you keep your sobriety, but you're high at the same time, which is really kind of fascinating. And I could see at higher doses that being really interesting, because at some point the two things are going to converge, right? At any high dose, the psychedelic and the normal state of awareness kind of converge. Breakthrough, there's different names, but it's a different characteristic of a psychedelic trip than knowing you're tripping. You're now so inside the trip that you've lost that self-reflection. Peaks do that really well. That's what a peak does. It goes so fast, it kind of takes over your ability to track your own self somehow. But this long slope, you just have this. You're just you, and then it kind of you're growing together. Anyway, that's fascinating.
Yeah, 2C-B though, it wasn't like that. 2C-B was more, to me, basically a lot like acid, but there's nothing wrong with being like acid, because acid's great.
Yeah.
But what could you help me contrast it from acid? Is there anything other than the time frame?
Well, yeah, it's the time frame and the tail. I guess technically, when you basically feel sober, you might feel a little hungover. That's when the tail starts, which on LSD, you're not tripping anymore. But 2C-B, as far as I could tell, really didn't have much of that, or it was way more manageable. And then, I felt more clear-headed on 2C-B than I do on acid. Similar to the mescaline. I would say that differentiates it for me.
Really?
I could still talk and think, and I wasn't. Similar. Those 2C-B and mescaline were similar that way for me. Yeah.
Well, let me ask.
About 2C-B.
Oh, I just. You're popping in and out a little bit.
Oh, did you not feel that about the 2C-B?
No, I didn't hear what you said, because you're popping it in and out a little bit.
Oh, did you not think that 2C-B was clear-headed like mescaline?
Well, not as much as mescaline. Because I got a little.
Yes. Right, there was that warpy kind of feeling.
Yeah, it was a warping kind of a feeling, not in a bad way, but more like acid kind of. And of course, I'm always thinking a lot on psychedelics. So, let's see. I'd like to switch a little bit to. Now that it's been a week, did you come away with any significant insights or anything from the experience in the week we had together?
Sorry. Repeat yourself.
I said, did you come away from the whole adventure, the week we had together, with any new insights or anything you are implementing in your life?
Interrupt me if I go out of service.
Okay, yeah, I'll just keep on playing and deal with it.
I'll stop talking. Let's see. Yeah, I guess kind of syncretic to the whole trip. I'm going through a big personal life change right now. I'm moving out of state possibly, and starting a new career possibly. And so I'm really thinking a lot about who I am, but part of who I am has to do with like that. About.
Oh, he got out. Yeah. He's like driving into the mountains, so he's in and out.
No, I'm going home, but I don't, I should have better reception everywhere. But anyway, so yeah, I'm thinking a lot about identity, and while I've enjoyed tripping in my life, it's been a very specific lesson. And to me, that lesson's been all about surrender. And then when you surrender, then there's all sorts of experiences in there. But they all felt like something that I was already good at, ultimately. I've had a lot of experience with that in normal life. So these new two felt like it was offering a different opportunity to work inside the psychedelic, and one that I feel like I can really bring my own personal, like, creative career work to. So I feel like now, because I identify as a psychonaut and need to have my tools, I have finally found my tools. And so it gave me a renewed sense of just where I'm going and what I'm using to get there and what I want to teach and who I am, and other ways too, where I live and lifestyle. But specific to the trip, yeah, those two compounds I feel are important for my work, because I would like to teach more. I teach some, but I need to have good tools that I identify with. So I do with these two. Other than that, so anyway, that's the summary, I suppose. I was kind of looking for some identity input. Also, I'm from the West Coast, so being out there makes me feel like a big part of myself that I haven't been in Colorado, since it's different out here. I don't know. That's kind of it. What about you?
Let's see, specifically, one theme really in my sort of adult life is working on like discipline, having sort of more conscious control. I was thinking about the definition of that. It's like the ability to make decisions based on long-term goals, and that involves short-term sacrifices. So this is something
otherwise
I've been
known as
what?
Adulthood. Otherwise known as adulthood.
Well, if you're going to be a success at anything, hopefully you were already doing it when you were 5, though.
That's true.
But let's see. Well, what I've implemented, I'll just say concretely, is that a couple of things. I'm practicing an hour a day. I think since getting back, I only missed once, and I really didn't have any choice. Practicing the seaboard, basically, this instrument, because it's something I'm committed to slowly getting better at and creating a relationship with over my life. But to do that, you got to actually do it. So I get up, and the first thing I'm kind of thinking is like, am I going to practice today? Sometimes it's in the morning, sometimes it's on a show. Like today, I didn't worry about it because I knew I was going to play probably an hour with Jeremy. And sometimes it's like that, and that's great practice because it's more like performing. And then something else along the same lines that I'm implementing is I am a super night owl. And sometimes if it's like 1 a.m, I'm high, I'm still not going to bed, I've got bad habits of adding a meal and eating a meal at that point. And so I'm implementing not eating any food. These are very concrete, but when I'm on psychedelics, oftentimes these are the kinds of lessons that I get. And also something that I'm working on is to make it more psychological, something I'm working on. It came up on this week, but it's been coming up for the last couple of months, is empowering yourself to be able to affect your own life. Don't make yourself a victim of your own habits, because your habits are your decisions. The example I always go to is the alcoholic who has 10 drinks a day. Well, that's 10 free decisions that you made every day, right? It wasn't some alien or demon or even a biochemical thing. I mean, those things might be real to a certain degree, but ultimately those 10 beers that you drank were 10 decisions that you made. So, and if you go too much down the road of here's my trauma, and here's the chemistry, and here's the dopamine, and here's the whatever, those things might be real, but don't allow that stuff to take away your personhood, your autonomy, your decision. You're the one who drank those 10 beers. You opened the bottle. So, and the more I meditate on that, the more I feel empowered to be able to make the changes in my life that I want to make. And that came up a bit on our trips. Especially when we were talking about how you're actually disciplined. You're laid back and you love to have a good time, but this is actually compensation for a lifetime of being extremely disciplined. Do you hear me?
Again, tripping is a compensation.
No,
or an expression. The fruit.
No, you didn't hear me. What I said is that you tend to be really laid back, and you're always like, I talked about how, like, I feel like the influence you try to have on me is I feel like I'm a high schooler and my buddies constantly trying to get me to play hooky. But the thing is that I have a lifetime of playing hooky, whereas Jeremy has a lifetime of being a good boy who shows up to class and does his homework. Kind of. And so we're always, this is something, another theme that I'm working in that we talked a lot about, is how oftentimes the values that you associate yourself with, like, I care about this, I care about that, here are my values, they're not actually the values that are running your life. It's just the opposite. The values that you say, this is what I believe, is that oftentimes the values that you say that you have are not the values that are running your life. They're the opposite. They are a compensation for the actual values that are running your life.
Yeah. It's basically, since we're limited humans, you grow up with certain skills and not others, and then later in life you tend to have to work on the others. But yeah, there's always this flip. Yeah, I'm very inherently disciplined and then always trying to loosen up. And I guess Chris is kind of the opposite. Because I grew up just having to be disciplined. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Even my parents were pretty. My mom, she proudly says that anything worth doing is worth doing badly.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Which is actually wise. Right, where always the phrase is anything worth doing is worth doing good, but is that actually true? There's probably examples of things that, spending your lifetime getting good at it maybe is a waste of time. But, in other words, there's nothing wrong with being a hobbyist. But the problem is that both of her sons have problems kind of manifesting anything in their lives because we're not boomers that had everything given to us. We're the children of boomers that had everything taken away.
Yeah.
He said with no resentment in his voice at all.
Yeah, right, yeah. And then
let's see, I'll go over, if as far as talking about what it is to trip, talking about the actual effects, I will always walk away from. Oftentimes I'll feel just kind of like spent or like almost like I've worked out, but spiritually worked out, you might say, after tripping. Especially, I was tripping a lot for 2 weeks. I tripped like 3 times the week before hanging out with Jeremy and then another twice with Jeremy. So I haven't even smoked salvia since I got back because I'm not like tired. I don't need it right now. Let's see. What was I going to say? Well, I dealt with a lot of stuff. We dealt with some personal stuff. I thought how we'd run the show and stuff like that and in our relationship, but that's not quite the appropriate for that. But it was important because working on relationship stuff when you're tripping with somebody else is a big part of the experience.
Yeah.
And we were at the grotto, which is where the background video is from a beautiful shrine, basically, in Portland, Oregon, and it's where we took 2C-B, and I grew up Catholic. And so I was working a little bit with that. And then Jeremy, what's interesting is that I grew up Catholic, have bounced in and out of Christianity my whole life, but in not really practicing because I've never fit in. Jeremy is a Jew, but he's like really been diving into Christianity for the last few months. So it's an interesting vibe. And something I was thinking about was the importance of, if you're a spiritual practitioner like me, having an institutional bed. I don't really have one, and I'm trying to build one. I'm trying to build Cloudless Rain into one, and I participate in the Silo Temple, a mushroom church in Eugene, Oregon, kind of because I hunger for having an institutional home. So I was dealing a little bit with that. There was actually, Jeremy went to the bathroom, and during the 5 minutes that Jeremy went to the bathroom, I was honestly contemplating becoming Catholic again.
Oh, yeah.
Then I remembered why I'm not Catholic, though. It's got nothing to do with me having a problem with them. It's got to do with them having a problem with me.
Yeah.
I'm not a regular practitioner. I'm more of a leader. That's who I am. I'm a philosopher and a mystic. I don't want to have to turn that stuff off in order to participate. But they don't fucking believe. They don't, they think everything I do is morally wrong. So, that ain't gonna work.
Which, by the way, I just started a section on the mystical roots of Christianity, so I'll have an interesting report maybe next week.
Just Chillin asked, he's about to, Just Chillin, tell me, he's talking about buying some dried leaves or some 10X salvia, and I don't know if he's implying that this is his first time, but dried leaves, if you smoke it, it takes a shitload. You can chew it, and some people love doing it, but I find it annoying because I just find sublingual, having a bunch of crap in my mouth, to be annoying. So it's like, it's extract all the way, 10 or 20X. That's always my answer. Other people disagree. Do you have an opinion?
My opinion is, if it's your first time, 10X is nice because you don't have to be so precise with the dosing, but if you really, really are getting enough, you can roast the bowl and have plenty. And then, the better you get at it, the more potent it can get. I don't know. Seems like it could be good.
I tend...
but have fun with it. Yeah, if you can get leaves.
Yeah, and when people say...
Oh, I was saying if you can get fresh leaves and chew them.
Oh, that would be cool to have fresh leaves. I've never had access to that. I do have a plant, but unfortunately it's not doing very well.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit worried about it, especially since I'm going on vacation and I'm not going to be able to take care of it. I think I need to repot it and give it better drainage. And if I did, I would like to have to get into growing salvia and then be able to use fresh leaves, because that's like a traditional method, but I've never gotten to do it.
Yeah, that'd be great. People say what?
Oh, well, one thing is, I think my biggest, I was just thinking about this morning. It annoys me because you see a lot on Reddit, the salvia page of Reddit, or the psychonaut page, where people, they send the message that getting high on salvia is like hard. And that you have to just take as much as possible. Get a puke bong, fill a huge bowl, hold it in your lungs for 40 seconds, as if it's like, they treat it almost like it's Kana, where it's like barely a drug. But don't you worry, salvia ain't barely a drug, okay? And you don't have to try that hard to get high on it. If it doesn't work out the first time, it will the second or third. And you do not want to just like quadruple your dosage because it didn't work the first time. That fucking shit that's how you hurt yourself. And people get hurt on salvia.
Seems like a double standard. If people think it's barely a drug and they're having a hard time getting high, and then the other half are taking too much and freaking out, and then something's off.
Well,
Seems like it would be one or the other.
It's related, though. People take too much because they've been led to believe that.
Oh, I see.
That in order to get it to work, they need to take tons. And
yeah. I think back to kind of the harm reduction homework / I think harm reduction research is really fun. I mean, if you're going to take these drugs, you might as well learn about them. I don't know. Just that's why you're doing them, is because they're interesting things. But oh right, yeah. People kind of classify. I could see somebody calling salvia not really a drug because it doesn't last so long. But if they're being metaphorical and they're not really giving you any information, then you don't really know what they're talking about. Drugs are so subjective that getting this kind of left brain scientific kind of data on drugs is helpful, because the rest of it is coming from a first person perspective of saying, it's not a drug, or oh my god, it's a crazy shit. Never do it, or whatever. It doesn't actually give you information. It's actually barely an opinion. It's just a reaction. Yeah, information is good. I was gonna say earlier, back to our kind of dual nature of you being, I don't know, maybe more free-spirited when you were young and might be more disciplined, and then working on the opposite. You and I collaborate really well. So I tend to interpret things that it's not for a lack of discipline necessarily. It's for, maybe it's imbalanced. You need some, but actually what you've done is almost overdeveloped another part. And like Chris, you may not be disciplined, or you may be trying to take things more seriously, but what you have done is a very intensive artistic and spiritual journey and cultivation. Probably, I would guess, giving more attention to things that you love, like music and art, and less things you don't like school. And then you end up focusing on the shit that you're bailing on, but actually you're kind of, really, really well developed in one area. So just to limit the denigration that we all can put on ourselves, see what you might be good at that someone else isn't, because you grew up doing it, whatever that is.
Well, that's true. I never say I really believe in creativity. I don't have to.
Yeah, right.
I pretty much sweat creativity. And so I'm not but I don't even talk about it very much. I hear about people who have to work on becoming more creative. People go to specialists to become more creative. They read books on how to become more creative, and I'm like, that's just not a problem I have.
Yeah, if anyone out there there's one of those people looking for help with more creativity, either one of us could get you jump-started. Yes, right, true. And, we collaborate well together. Anyway, whatever. That thought was on my mind.
Although, I guess I just wish I had practiced more when I was younger, I guess.
My partner and kids are the opposite. They came out, they didn't practice at all. A little bit maybe, but just to as much work as it takes they're all graphic or visual artists, but they came out of the womb doing it. And it just, you just practice 1 hour if you want to learn how to draw, photorealism, and then you just draw it, and then you move on to the next thing. They're so naturally talented. I wasn't like that with music. I had a knack. I have a talent, but I had to work at it. Anyway, I don't know what we're talking about now, but
I came up actually pretty good at photography, I guess.
Oh yeah, oh nuts.
Yeah, my family did a lot of photography. We took classes together on photography a couple of times. And we would go take like landscapes and stuff together. And then my parents had fancy or pretty good cameras. And
Cool.
I never took it seriously, but look at where I am now. I shoot video obsessively. I don't take still shots obsessively, but oh my God. I shoot video obsessively. I probably, on this, in 2 weeks, I went to the grotto a total of 3 times in 2 weeks because it was tripping, and the grotto's for tripping. They just don't know they just don't know that is.
Yeah, if you thought a Catholic monastery wasn't the right place to do psychedelics, you're wrong.
Yep, you're wrong. Yeah. Anyway, during those 3 trips, I must have shot, particularly on the second one, 20 videos.
Oh yeah.
The percentage of stuff that I actually publish is not high. I even sometimes shoot videos that I am planning on publishing, and then I forget about it, and they're like in some hard disk somewhere, you know. Nobody will ever see it. I like to believe after I'm dead, somebody will go through all my data, but you want to know what? No, after you die, no one's going through your data. They probably won't even erase it, you know? It'll be...
You should just publish, when you get into your 90s, just publish everything you have online, regardless of the format. That way it's just there. Somebody will some 14-year-old will stumble upon it when you die, and you'll be famous. First post-mortem.
Still Chillin mentioned that he's buying some salvia, and other than salviahealings.com with Chris Solomon, who's my buddy and who does wonderful work, and he does sell high-grade, kind of expensive high-grade salvia that I highly recommend. But out of the normal ones, Salvia Cellar, the one that you're using, is my favorite. Not necessarily the best quality, but their prices are fine and their website is great. Mostly, I really like their website. They take harm reduction and they take that stuff really seriously at Salvia Cellar. So that is why I always say purple sticky sucks. Don't do purple sticky. And Salvia Dragon is known for inconsistency. Salvia Hut is fine, but I prefer Salvia Cellar. And those are kind of the big names. I don't know why, but those are kind of the big names in buying Salvia.
You know, there's a website, shamanextracts.com. I don't know. If anyone's interested, you can find lots of legal, kind of mildly psychoactive compounds. On the internet, dreaming herbs and stuff that works, like Kana. I'm not gonna trip too hard, but it does something. Anyway, I was surprised when I started looking around. I wanted to make a note about harm reduction and just kind of like come to the defense of psychedelics. The fact that harm reduction exists is it's a reflection of the consciousness of those people involved in mind-expanding pursuits. It's not an expression of the fact that these chemicals are so dangerous. At the worst case, really, with a traditional psychedelic, the worst case is you're going to be uncomfortable for 8 hours, and maybe have a little bit of trauma afterwards. But you're not fucking killing yourself or going into a coma or blacking out or crashing your car. I mean, I suppose if you were that high in acid or anything and you were stupid enough to drive, you could crash your car. But harm reduction is like, alcohol should have more harm reduction than psychedelics. That's the point I'm making. It's a concept that should be used more broadly. maybe it exists elsewhere. I only know the psychedelic culture to have invented it, at least by that name. But it doesn't mean that psychedelics are that dangerous, therefore they need to do it. It just means people are really interested in cultivating their consciousness, their mind, or into healing. And this is just another tool to like make psychedelics healing aids, whether that's fun or emotional or whatever. That's what I think. Yeah, harm reduction is a series of methodologies used to amplify the healing powers of psychedelics. That's what it is. And you can apply it to anything, and it really should be applied. As far as real safety, yes, that's real, but no more than driving a car. Probably a lot less than shooting a gun, and again, less than drinking. That's anyway. There's my 2 cents. Yeah, but it's great, So we do all these things. Well, let's see, where were we? I guess we were kind of comparing them. I would say, from my perspective, the comparison is similar to what you said. I found 2C-B to be more kind of mentally warpy than mescaline, and the mescaline being so gradual that it kind of added into your reality. Ultimately, it would surpass it, but I even feel like I felt it the next day because it wore off so gradually. I mean, maybe I actually did, but maybe my mind had to learn to integrate into my ordinary consciousness the psychedelic experience. And as it went away, it's almost as if you hear a sound and at some point you can't tell if you're hearing it or imagining it as it gets softer. That was kind of the experience with the mescaline. And so I kind of hung on to it. And even on the 2C-B, I feel like it kicked up that feeling of like, oh, this is part of normal life. So that's maybe why I felt that the 2C-B was similar. But I agree, the mescaline was very clear-headed, and 2C-B was more like LSD. Otherwise, like somatically, I feel like they were pretty similar. They both had a body buzz. 2C-B was more visual, but not a lot. I was energized, right? I wasn't sleepy. I was like, had ideas and wanted to talk and walk around, and they felt manageable. There's something about the other two, the acid and mushrooms, that are kind of, even at low doses, there's this kind of overwhelming quality to them. It's almost part of the characteristic of the drug. Partly it's the peak, but even the mushrooms can really put you like face to face with your own, stuff that you don't want to feel. It kind of can do that. And I feel like acid kind of does that in a different kind of way. It's just like, it's kind of unrelenting. They're both unrelenting, but these 2C-B mescaline were, they could work with them. They weren't there to like fucking, hammer you over the head or like do something to you. They were more like companions. Yeah, that's what I thought was similar about it.
Okay.
Yep.
I thought that was more true of the 2C or mescaline, but another thing is we, of course, you for 1 week, I guess, and me for 2 weeks, put together a whole sort of psychedelic week. Do you feel like when you do that, do you feel like there's sort of a, how do I put it, more than the sum of the parts kind of quality?
Yeah, I guess this brings up integration, which I would make an opening statement to say that what integration is actually reviewing your experience, remembering how you thought, how you felt, such that you can access that state of mind more easily on your own. In the same way, if you learn how to imagine...
You mean without drugs?
Without drugs, yeah. If you learn how to imagine, do a guided meditation, you're on the beach, or anything you imagine is going to make you feel something. And so as you kind of, in the same way of the sound wearing off and you're trying to imagine it, or maybe you're hearing it, but it's so soft. It's like that with your whole consciousness. As it wears off, Chris is a kind of master at this with salvia. As it wears off, you kind of follow it and just kind of hold that sensation in your body, and really, so your brain really focuses on it. This is one aspect of integration. And now, if you get really good at it, the feeling is so in your body, you don't even need to take the drug. You just hold the vial, and you kind of like we probably all can. Like, you remember what it feels like, and then you kind of feel it. Anyway,
yeah, we talked about that too. Actually, that was another thing that you'll remember that I was dealing with a little bit, was some weird salvia stuff. Because I did salvia while on mescaline, and it was fucking hit me really, really hard, even though it was a moderate dose. But salvia, I've got a lot of reverse tolerance, and salvia really does it for me. And I went to the fucking moon. And what's funny is Jeremy took the same dose and did not.
Yeah.
Did you even feel that salvia very much?
I did more on the 2C-B. I did, but it wasn't that intense. Yeah, but and then
like I had this, like, it's weird. Sometimes I'll have a difficult time on salvia, and I actually thought, wow, I don't like this. But it's not out of control the way some people do. It's just, that's not, I mean, I could smoke more and probably be more out of control, but basically for me, salvia is I always can opt out, even if I'm peaking really hard, which I was. But I can always opt out if I want. It's just how I trip with, hi there, kitty. It's just how I am with salvias. I can always opt out, and I often, mid-trip, especially if I'm having a problem, will open my eyes and just take a little break. Because it's more about meditation than getting high, ultimately.
Right. And the characteristics that come along with that. So you said reverse tolerance.
Yeah, and then my next one is the next morning I was like, okay, I'm going to smoke salvia again. Just from a sober base, smoke some in the morning, which I've done many times. And then I hit this, I'm not sure I like this. And then it dawned on me, oh my God, what would it mean for me and my identity if I quit smoking salvia? Again, it wasn't out of control, but I was I was curious. I was like, oh wow, I'm going to sit with that. Think about my relationship with salvia because of this channel, and it would be inconvenient. So I sort of thought about that. But then on the third day, while on 2C-B, I smoked salvia, and this time it was like literally one flake. I have to get down to the very basics and feel like what the base feeling feels like. And then that was the healing I needed. I need to get back down to where it's more about meditation, and the salvia is just helping me get there. Getting wasted on salvia for me well, that's not true. I've had a lot of really deep experiences mixing it on ketamine that are wonderful. So it has its place.
Yeah. Somebody commented on one of Chris' posts lately, and he was discussing, what's the word for it? Anyway, basically where you use multiple drugs at once. And somebody got offended by that idea. And this was Chris has explained it on videos. You know, you use different drugs for different reasons, different lengths, and you use a little bit of everything, right? So I think it's all the stuff is dose dependent, right? No one's taking full doses of everything. That's not how you do it.
No, that'd be crazy. That's like crazy people on Reddit.
Yeah. You know, so as far as the cumulative effect goes, yes, I did have a cumulative effect. First it was, I mean, technically first it was partying because I got, you know, we did that the first night. But that's relevant, right? It kind of gets you into vacation mode and having fun. And then the mescaline really left me with, I would say the mescaline is auto-integrating. You don't have to integrate after a mescaline trip because it does it all along the way. But so afterwards I felt very much in this well, I don't know how I feel to myself while on psychedelics. It was kind of amplified on the mescaline because it was so gradual. So I kind of carried that into the next couple days of a sense of like, oh, this is who I am, both who I am on psychedelics, but also using psychedelics and teaching them. Like, this is a big part of my identity. And then the 2C-B kind of felt like, I like that order. I'm glad we did it in that order. The 2C-B kind of felt like it came inside that zone. So it was like, oh, I was thinking about 2C-B as another tool and noticing how it works in the body differently. But I was able to do it from a more rational perspective, I guess, because the mescaline left me in the state of kind of being expanded, but also in real clarity. So I could kind of be in both worlds at once. And so yeah, some personal stuff. I don't need a lot of, I'm not sure I got a lot of real personal insights. I think it kept some energy moving. And as far as application, the application of the stuff for me is the state of mind. Obviously can't be all high all the time, but I always want to have access to who I am on these compounds, and so that's what meditation is for and other practices. So for me, the integration was just kind of to hold in mind the drug experience, this experience of myself, and the kind of identity structure that was built up, and basically just to hold that as often as I can during the day. You know, think about it, have insights into it, develop models, I don't know, you know, ask questions. Yeah, for me right now, I have so much going on that, well, maybe that's not even a reason, but yeah, that was my application. Yeah, did you feel like you had cumulative effects over the week? Or even from your previous week?
I did, but it's hard to put it into words, which I guess is basically what you were saying. I did, because actually individually they were all only low to moderate experiences.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing even thinking about being a hero dose kind of a situation, not even in the realm. And yet, after 2 weeks of meditating and taking various substances and going to the grotto, the Catholic sanctuary a lot, overall, I mean, I guess it's like a retreat, like a two-week retreat, even though it wasn't technically a retreat. Well, I guess some of it was. I was actually on vacation for some of it. Guess we lost Jeremy boy. Oh well.
Are you rapping along to your playing?
No, I'm not rapping. I'm beatboxing.
Or I mean beatboxing, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's right. You can't even hear it. I forgot. I already turned it off. But you were gone, so I needed to fill it with something. That's easy. That's the fun. Beatboxing is the funnest solution.
Okay. Nice. Oh, wow. What else do we want to talk about? Integration. I guess I was kind of making a point on that.
I thought what you were saying was sort of an interesting point as far as what integration means. People talk about integration, but like, what does that actually mean? Other than we're going to talk a lot about afterward, you know. But what you're saying is like the state itself. Can you learn something from the state, not just the lessons, but the state, right?
Yeah. Can you remember? Can you retain access to that state?
I think that's an interesting point.
Yeah. Traditionally integration is you had a mind-blowing experience. It brought up all of the stuff that maybe you felt in the moment, but didn't have real cognitive wherewithal to, understand or put into words in the moment, because psychedelics, at least mushrooms and acid, kind of prevent that. I guess that's why I say they're surrender. Anyway, and then the integration is basically putting into words all the things that you felt and understanding what they are, organizing them. That tends to be a lot of what integration is. There's group elements, but, outside that, I guess you could say that at first integration is trying to retain a connection to the aspects of your own self that the psychedelic brings up. And if they're new aspects, it might take a second to understand them, put them into words, integrate them. So, by integrating. But then once you have a fairly well integrated self, then you're still in an expanded state of consciousness, but now it's more creative, maybe it's more choiceful, maybe you're doing a practice, it's all about God or all about whatever, something creative, I don't know. Then you kind of replace personal process with creativity, and then the integration is, can you retain access to that level of creativity or spiritual expansion while you're sober? Which means you have to do focused meditation to remember so quiet, you can barely feel it anymore, but vague memory, and you try to really concentrate on that one memory or whatever of what it might have felt like until you can feel it again. And that's what one kind of meditation. So anyway, that's another kind of integration. Seems to be that was probably other ones, but those are two of them anyway. Therapeutic, party, it goes party, therapeutic, creative. I don't know. They're all different, but they all have their benefits.
Yeah, I'm going to think about that. Because I always think about the whole point is these concrete kinds of insights, but actually learning from the state itself is ultimately, maybe that's more important. If the state itself you can remember and then bring some of that lesson, not in terms of cognitive quality, but the state itself. Can I, like through meditation, bring a little bit of salvia or a little bit of mescaline into my sober life? That would be, an incredible lesson.
Yeah, I think what you bring up is there's content and context, and the insights into specific things are content. But at the end of the day, they're all coming from a similar source. And so if that source is the state, if you can get yourself into a state where you just have insights all the time, you don't have to worry about the specific insights enough. They just come. You're more concerned about the state of mind. Yeah, I would argue. Well, I don't totally know, but I would guess, Chris, you have that with salvia. And even if you're driving at an insight, you're still so connected to the state itself. It's almost like you're doing two things at once. Yeah, same with the mind, you know. The content of the mind is different from the nature of the mind. Right? The nature of the mind is the potential to talk and see things, you know, in your mind and have ideas. That's the potential of the nature of the mind. But if you don't have any of that content, you know, there's this kind of quiet, spacious awareness is what you're left with. And if you get good enough at that, then you can turn that into kind of anything. And, you know, so that the nature of mind would be the psychedelic state. I mean, ultimately. Yeah, actually, the nature of the psychedelic mind, the nature of the sober mind. I remember when I was doing a lot of breath meditation in the middle of a mushroom trip, because that's what I was doing at the time. Even if I couldn't really put together any other coherent data, I would always find my breath. And I would just watch my breath. And in that moment, watching my breath felt like watching my breath. It didn't matter whether I was sober or tripping really hard. It was just watching my breath. Other things outside the breath felt different, but those, so yeah, there is a way to have this self experience inside the drug that's ultimately deeper than anything it says. And, you know, I mean, if anyone's excited about words, I'm pretty excited about words, but at the same time, it's good to, you know, hear the empty container also. Yeah, because then, you know, I mean, I don't know, that's kind of like a Chinese or Vedic, well, probably a lot of cultures, you know, a lot of cultures say that the mind starts in the heart. And if the heart is about feelings, and if drugs or life or sex or sadness, whatever, if you have all these feelings in your life, then it directs the mind, right? If your heart is angry, your mind's going to think all these thoughts about hurting somebody or what, get even. If your heart's feeling loving, and then your mind generates all these thoughts. It generates whatever the heart feels. It's simplistic, but it's kind of the truth of how you're feeling. So the psychedelic makes you feel a certain way, and then your mind generates certain thoughts about whatever it is, which are generally considered to be healing thoughts. That's why people use compounds or fun. You know, and there's a feedback loop, you know. Then you learn that a thought makes you feel a certain way, and the feeling makes that thought. You can go spiral up or, you know, spiral down is more common if you're not paying attention. But yeah, that's what I think the psychedelic, what are you calling it? The state itself.
Yeah, the state itself, which is just, I mean, the high, really.
Yeah, the high, right.
It's not just, it's funny because the high is like this chemical thing that does to your mind, and then there's also a state as in like what you do with it, which I think
sure.
It's like where psychedelics and meditation come together, sort of, because you know, like some people, I think that it's particularly people who are led to using really high doses. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but part of the reason that they want high doses, is because they're not meditating. And
right.
So
there's
they're
more
not
mind
using
to
that
push.
little tiny bit of a high and then using their mind to expand into it, which is what I do, particularly with salvia, but other things too. I think you do that a bit with weed. You smoke weed and you're barely high from a chemical standpoint, but obviously it's doing something to you.
Yeah. You know, I noticed at the grotto, I'm doing this Jesus heart meditation. And I noticed when I was on the 2C-B that the more I focused on the sensation in that meditation, the higher I would feel. And I think this means two things. One, the heart really is leveraging consciousness, and consciousness immediately makes you have a feeling. So there's this immediate feedback, but it starts in the heart. Number two, the more you're aware of your states, basically, the more you're aware of how you're thinking, feeling, the more focused you are on yourself, the quieter your mind is, and the more sensitive you are necessarily to your own content, because you're looking to feel these kind of sometimes small details, which you have to focus really hard. And when you focus really hard, you're more sensitive and you're more integrated, and you can create your own experience. And in the inverse, if you're running around shouting at the top of your lungs, it's going to take a lot more of any chemical for you to feel, because it has all that to compete with. But the quieter and more introspective you are, noticing how you think and feel, it takes less and less. Or you can go deeper and deeper. I almost want to say it's more salient, and I like that word, because it's less about the intensity and it's more about the resolution. And so, yeah, the more inward focused and quietly focused you are, the more resolution you have. And probably the more intense it'll feel subjective. But kind of like what Chris does, if you want to snap out of it, you open your eyes and the feeling kind of falls away. And then if you close your eyes and sit down again, it intensifies because there's less competing data. So it's a good tool to use. Then you have more creative control over your state of consciousness all the time, and you're better able to, meet yourself in these non-ordinary states and not be uncomfortable, not freak out, because you're just hanging with yourself. And as long as you're hanging with yourself, you feel good about it, and then you feel good and you're happy, and there you go. So it kind of, all these things are kind of overlapping. The more, it's interesting, people ask about spirituality. The more focused you get, the more everything just works differently. It's not like, well, to Chris's point, you might start experiencing a bunch of crazy things when you start doing focus meditations, but afterwards you just get used to it and you don't interpret them as crazy anymore. You just work differently, but it really does start with these just literally quieting your mind down and sitting, and then all of a sudden whatever, all the stuff we just said.
Right. Although drugs aren't always about, that's psychedelics. But, maybe alcohol, you could almost say the same thing with alcohol in a way. People use a lot of alcohol because they want to be honest, they want to let loose, they want to dance. Well, if you could get to that state without the alcohol, which some people can, see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, no, I feel like we're both digging around for another insight. I suppose you could say then that the more subtle control, the more salience you have, the more resolution you have over your awareness of your own state, the more you can affect your own state. The more easily you can affect your own state by remembering other states, or by thinking thought, or by doing practice, any number of things. Alcohol, it doesn't even matter. A few people are trying to focus on what does it feel like to stand in line at the bank, because they don't really like that experience that much, assuming you don't. And so you're not going to try to dig more into that. You're going to dig into the things that feel like, they make you feel happy or empowered or creative.
I think this is an interesting topic. I feel like I could actually learn a lot by thinking more about how I feel when I drink.
Oh yeah, man, absolutely. Or if you drink things that are harder to drink, you have to go somewhere else, it forces you to focus.
Well, I think more in terms of being extroverted. and funny. You know, if I've been drinking, I crack more jokes.
Oh yeah, good for a comedian.
Well, maybe for the writing.
Oh yeah, well that's good. No, I think that's a good point. I guess you said two things. One, earlier on, you said, well, maybe you should focus on the state itself. And then you're saying, well, maybe you should focus on the state itself while drinking. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I'm saying focusing on the state that lesson isn't only for psychedelics. It could be for Molly. It could be for even alcohol, weed. You know, I smoke weed to be creative. Well, what does it feel like to be high? Maybe I can sober. Not that there's anything wrong with smoking weed, but if you can integrate that while sober, that's a powerful tool.
Yeah, absolutely. And presumably, because you don't do so much, because you basically turn everything into a meditation, that should be really easy for you to do what you say, because you have all the skills to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting. There's this crossover effect. Same thing with musicians. Non-musicians would notice that musicians have an easier time playing an instrument that they're not trained on, for the first time than a non-musician does, because they already know music and they know what they're trying to get at. And, they have more. Even if your embouchure is not there, at least you can kind of figure it out. Give me a report if you do any of that, because I don't do that. I do a lot of this practice we're talking about. And I suppose meditation traditions would say technically doing it all the time is the point, but you can do it as much as you can do it, right? You're doing other shit, but there's something about 2C-B and mescaline that gives me the focus. No, let's see. There's something about 2C-B and mescaline that feels accessible from ordinary consciousness in a way that LSD and mushrooms either don't, or I really kind of don't want to. Like, I've done a lot of work with my own personal state of mind on these drugs, as opposed to how they feel in the body. But with 2C-B and mescaline, how it feels in the body, to me, feels more usable. The other ones are fun, but they don't feel like they apply to me. And it's always been my dirty little secret. I've done them a lot, and I'm such a proponent of these medicines, but I didn't really feel like those psychedelics I had done were giving me what I wanted. And I really feel like these other two do. And part of it is the way my mind works on them, and how they feel in the body are both things that I can to feel more relevant to access from ordinary consciousness. Or there's a bridge. I can build a bridge. The other ones, I can't. The state they put me in is not one that I use ordinarily. And so it always felt like this. I'm taking a left-hand turn for 8 hours and coming back. These other two feel like they're really the direction I'm always trying to go. And just to differentiate, there's the feeling of the drug in the body, and then there's, which differs from drug to drug, and then there's your own mind, how it works. Are you talking? Are you thinking? Are you creative? Are you more emotional? Those kind of things. Then on both those tips, I felt like who I became is more in alignment with who I'm trying to become, or who I am naturally, something like that, more than the other two. Yeah.
Gotcha. Although I really think some of it was just the timing of, it was like time for you to trip.
Yeah, that's true. But man, I mean, you and I talk a lot. You know that. I always after. I mean, I guess I'm trying to defend my point. I don't really need to. I agree with you, but I've always said to you, Chris, that I can't remember what I said. That there's something I used to say about mushrooms and acid. Now it's escaping me, but something to the effect of I like them, but I can't use them, or I can't think, I can't. What I'm looking for, they don't let me do.
Yeah, I think that you've always said that they're not very cognitive, and that being cognitive is what you want.
Yeah, that you're right. It's kind of like well, is this true? Similar to the previous distinction between discipline and having fun, of which Chris and I are now crossing in the middle. The other two is thinking and feeling. I've always been almost a compulsive feeling. And the more feelings I had, the more, when I was young, the more I was trained to work with my feelings. I wasn't trained to think them away. I wasn't trained to go to a party or go running. I was trained to focus on the feelings and process them. And, it has its pros and cons, but basically over time, I've wanted my feeling reality to be tempered by my mind and having cohesive thoughts and being well educated and being creative but organized about it. And that kind of helped me keep because at some point you're just emotional. It's not doing anything for you and it's not giving you any information. So it's time just to not be emotional. And so I think that's another reason I find both acid and mushrooms in different ways very emotional, and I just don't need more of that. And in my mind, I'm kind of linking them because serotonin is more emotional, dopamine is more excitatory, and it might be total fabrication on my part, but given that these drugs are based on these core molecules, I just feel the serotonin drugs, the acid and mushrooms, to be more emotional and more surrender and more insecure and all the shit that I've kind of gotten over. And these other ones are more about clarity and ideas and having insights and having fun. I mean, mushrooms can be fun on the back end, and acid really is fun, but it's for me, it's not creative fun. It's letting go, just everything falls away into the universe, and that's fun. But anyway, so yeah, that's my rationale or my understanding. But that's pretty subjective. I feel less emotional and more clear-headed and more I could create reality, or I felt empowered. I didn't felt empowered. So.
I am getting a call, and I think we should probably call it a day.
All right. Great. Well, this has been fun.
All right. I'll start dropping things out. I was going to say, are we still on or not? Oh, we are still on. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Well, I thought, we've kind of crafted the intro. I was just spontaneously thought, how could we end our calls that feel succinct, but, kind of we punctuated it instead of just dropping off.
Well, sometimes I musically kind of come to a peak.
All right. Well, you do that, and I'll say today we've been talking about 2C-B and mescaline, which are a different chemical class of psychedelics than mushrooms and acid, and we went on a trip and we looked at it from many angles. And thanks for hanging with us on this call. Yeah, this is number 12, and we'll see you next week.